much has come together as an alliance of interested individuals, organizations, and community members, businesses, anybody who has a stake in the future of Prince Edward County. We're holding space and building capacity to kind of put together our collective action to a lot of good. And if there's something that we've heard in the community conversations we've been having all across the county for the past year, it's that housing and affordability is a central concern and priority for the future of residents and all kinds of stakeholders. So we are so pleased to come together and have this space today where we can learn a little more and then put our kind of collective efforts towards action in directly this area. So thank you so much for everybody coming to participate, to learn. We look forward to learning today and sharing what we learned. So I'd like to toss it back to Dominique to kick off what is going to be a wonderful way to start a Monday.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you, Katie. My name is Dominique Jones. I'm the Executive Director of the County Foundation, which is the local community foundation in Prince Edward County. And I'm here today because the County Foundation is one of the founding partners behind Thrive PEC. So today, essentially how we're going to run this down is that we've got Rosemarie Powell here from the Toronto Community Benefits Network. I'm going to introduce Rosemarie, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the organization. We've got some questions prepared. And then as always, we're going to open it up to the audience because we really want to hear questions that you have and what's important to you so that Rosemarie can best field that. So before we get too carried away, I do want to start with a land acknowledgement. And Rosemarie, please feel free to chime in after the fact if you have an acknowledgement that you would like to give as well. So many of us are zooming in, working from and residing in the county. So this is our land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are zooming in and working from the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. These peoples agreed to mutual sharing obligations and responsibilities as stewards of the land and water. We recognize that these are now our shared obligations, working in partnership with our current neighbors, the Mohawk Bay of Quinte peoples. And if anybody has any other different acknowledgements that they would like to make, also feel free to make use of the chat function as well, if you're coming from a different area. Rosemarie, before I introduce you, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that section?
We usually like to just remind people that community benefits agreements, which I'm going to be talking to everyone about, builds off of Indigenous practices, actually, because of the duty to consult by the government of Canada. Whenever building on Indigenous lands, Canada has a duty to consult. And so there are over 300 impact benefits agreements that have been signed with Indigenous communities across Canada. So just to acknowledge and respect that.
Thank you, Rosemarie. Thank you for that. So I'm going to give a little bit of information about Rosemarie before I turn it over to her. Rosemarie Powell is the Executive Director of the Toronto Community Benefits Network. Rosemarie is a passionate advocate for social, economic, and environmental justice. She has led for over 20 years from the grassroots up, managing and developing several innovative and impactful community programs and services to support underrepresented groups' access to the labor market. Her community engagement work in Jane Finch earned several awards for her leadership and imagination. Rosemarie is currently the Executive Director of Toronto Community Benefits Network, as mentioned, and the Toronto Community Benefits Network is a community labor coalition of over 120 member organizations, which initiated successful community benefit agreements for the Eglinton, Crosstown, and Finch West LRT transit projects, West Park Healthcare Center, and Woodbine Casino expansion. So we are very fortunate, Rosemarie, to have you with us today, and we're so excited for the conversation. I'll turn it over to you to get started, and there may be some prompting questions from myself as we go along. You mentioned that you might have some things that you want to share with us on the screen, so please feel free. And then, as mentioned, at the end, we're going to open it up to everybody in the group to ask their burning questions. Over to you, Rosemarie.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you for the invitation, Christine. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. And whenever I get the opportunity to talk about community benefits, I'm always in. And I love to see, Maureen, you talk about just the conversation that you were having in the shopping, in the supermarket about community benefits. You know, that makes me excited to see that this conversation is you know, it's on the hearts and minds of people, right? And you know, community benefits is a really great model, I think. You know, biased or not, that that actually works. It provides a process for people to be able to intervene in the planning and decision making when it comes to development. So yes, I do have a PowerPoint, which I may or may not show. I have links. I really wanted to hear from you in terms of, you know, what are your expectations, what it is that you wanted to learn. And I know that there are some people who may not have a, you know, the background, at least about the Toronto Community Benefits Network and some of the projects that we're undertaking. And so I will do that kind of overview first, but then, okay. But yes, I want questions. And some I may be able to answer and some I may not be able to answer, but I think, yeah, this is the start to a really great conversation. So let me see if I'm good at actually starting up a PowerPoint presentation. Hold on, here we go. This is our standard PowerPoint presentation, enable editing and screen share. All right. Okay, you can see my screen. Lovely.
Yep.
How do I say start? From beginning. All right, there we go. So Kumsa was going to make this presentation for us. He is not feeling so good today, so I'm happy to step in. So just a little bit of a background about the Toronto Community Benefits Network. We were founded in 2013 and we incorporated in 2014 as an economic justice organization. We're a community labor coalition, which is really important to us. It's a key tenet of how we operate. We started out with about 13 community and labor organizations and groups back in 2013 who met when there was an opportunity for when they learned about the Eglinton Crosstown project, an $8.5 billion transit project that was being built by Metrolinx with taxpayer dollars, obviously, and running through what we identify here in Toronto as neighborhood improvement areas. And this 26 station and stops transit line was going to be running through 12 to 13 of those neighborhood improvement areas. Neighborhood improvement areas in Toronto are basically identified by the City of Toronto and United Way through statistics and research and a report that came out basically identifying, at the time it was 13 priority neighborhoods and they expanded it to, or dissected it to 31 neighborhood improvement areas. Basically, these were identified as such because of the high levels of you know, unemployment and, you know, challenges with poverty, challenges with high youth unemployment, and also youth delinquency oftentimes. What characterized these neighborhoods in particular in Toronto was that these neighborhoods were highly racialized. Even more so than the general population of Toronto, which you may or may not know, but currently in Toronto, there is a population of 51% non-white who actually live here. And when we looked at these particular neighborhoods, especially, even those numbers were surpassed. And so you could see that this kind of, you know, economic disparity was really, you know, minority groups were bearing the brunt of that burden. And so, you know, community organizations, labor groups, community leaders were looking at this, you know, economic disparity and social disparity and environmental disparity and saying, you know, how is it that government can use our own taxpayer dollars where we go to work, pay our taxes, and on these major government projects that are, providing good jobs and contracts to the construction industry in particular, and others, because there's huge supply chain. And there is actually no real intentionality about making sure that people who are living in these neighborhoods where these massive investments were happening were going to be benefiting anyway from these opportunities. So that was the consciousness at the time. And they looked at, what are some of the ways that they can organize themselves. And because, of this labor connectedness that community had, and labor had done this kind of work with the Indigenous communities across Canada, and also in the United States and the UK, there are really good examples of community benefits agreements that have worked. And so we had labor at the table. They had experience doing that in previous types of projects. And so they brought that as an opportunity to the community, as a process to the community that we could use. And they studied it and decided, you know what, yes, we're going to adopt this kind of an approach. And so, yeah, that's just number one. I'm just getting started. I have 10 pages. So I'm going to, some things I'll skip over real quickly, but I just wanted to give you that kind of context.
That's great.
Thanks. And so, yeah, so the, as a not-for-profit organization, we incorporated with 13 organizations initially as the founding partners. Today, we're now 121 organizations and groups who are members. And we had initial financial support from the foundation, so the Atkinson Foundation, Metcalf Foundation, and the United Way of Greater Toronto. They've walked the journey with us, so they've never dropped us throughout the entire time. We're almost, 2013? Yeah, 10 years, coming. And so they've supported us from day one and continue to walk the journey with us. Our work is very, very much a one-track minded kind of concept. It's centered on developing community benefits agreements. So whenever we see a major infrastructure project, a major development project happening, our goal is to intervene in that planning process and to make sure that the voice of community is centered in those conversations, that people who would normally be left out of those processes have a way to give their informed consent, informed feedback. That's a very important. We do a lot of issue education and capacity building in the process. We make sure that we reach deep into our local communities and find people who otherwise wouldn't have been consulted in the general planning process. We started out with our first 5-year strategic plan that went from 2016 to 2021. That's when I joined. I basically, jumped right in and threw me right under the bus day one. That was the, they had already been talking to Metrolinx about the Eglinton Crosstown project, the Community Labor Coalition and Metrolinx. They were very close to a deal by the time I came, but there was one issue that was preventing them from being able to move forward. And that's because there were no targets, and labor and insisted that you must have targets. And that's how any community benefits agreement works. We're not, this development industry, they're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. And not only that, when we all have a target and we know what we're working towards, we can then monitor, track, and evaluate. And so since there were no targets, there was no agreement for 2 years before I joined the TCBN. And so when I came, the first job that I got was Metrolinx was ready to get to the table to talk about targets. And so we engaged in a process of going to our different labor partners, going to our different community partners, and just asking them, what's a fair target? What should we go for? And we settled on 15% as the target that we wanted to. And so we put that forward to Metrolinx, and we had some really intense conversations with our counterparts across the table. And we ended up with a 10% commitment from Metrolinx. And so with that 5-year, initial first 5-year strategic plan, it was about implementing that. right on the heels of the Eglinton Crosstown was also the Finch West LRT. And so now that we had a commitment to the 10% was then applied immediately to the Finch West LRT, since it's a Metrolinx project, and every other project we got a commitment that they would include the target. So imagine our surprise, which we'll talk about later on. And so our organization has grown since I came on board with the organization in 2016 to 2021. We have social enterprises as part of our membership, business associations, community organizations, labor organizations and groups, workforce organizations, training organizations, etc. And now we've negotiated about CBAs on about 10 projects in the last 7 years. And so building on the success of those first 5 years, where we've seen over 2,000 people employed from historically disadvantaged communities and over $17 million spent in social procurement, we have a plan going forward of, and I'll talk more about what that kind of looks like. So as you can see, I'm not paying attention to the PowerPoint presentation. Here's the about. I'll share it with you also just so that you have it. TCBN, I think the one thing about this page is the part that says TCBN has emerged into a Black-led organization with a majority of our board and staff representing the cross-section of neighborhoods and identities that community benefits agreements are intended to benefit. So for us, it was really important to walk the talk. We're pushing for equity, diversity, and inclusion in the construction industry, who has, largely left out, Black and racialized folks, newcomers, Indigenous peoples, and women. When you look at the construction industry, despite being, heavily invested by government, they have a really poor track record of diversity. And so when we started out to look at, developing the implementation plan for the Eglinton Crosstown, initially back in 2013, and why we were really pushing for these community benefits agreements is because we were looking at stats that basically said that within the registered apprenticeship system, there was 1.2% at the time of racialized peoples that are actually in a registered apprenticeships. 1.2% when you think about the city of Toronto being 51% across Canada, I believe it's 25% non-white, in Ontario 35, somewhere around there. So it just didn't, there's a definite mismatch. And not only did we think it was, that's something, there's definitely an injustice there, but we were also looking at it as an opportunity. Because at the same time, it wasn't an industry, the construction industry, that was also experiencing, huge demand because Toronto and it's just booming with construction, billions and billions of dollars being spent on, roads and bridges, schools, hospitals, transit. We saw it as an opportunity too, because the industry is actually, hemorrhaging talent. There's a huge retirement, that's happening over the next, it's been happening and will continue for the next 10 years. So they need talent desperately. And so it's an opportunity for the industry to find talent from their local communities and find talent from those, communities that have been historically left out of the labor market and out of the construction industry. So for us, we see it as a win-win and want to work collaboratively with them to roll up our sleeves as community and to contribute to the change that we want to see. And for us as an organization, it was really important that we made sure that our membership is diversified, our board is diversified, our staff is diversified. We don't have a good track record with, having staff that is Indigenous, that identifies as being from Indigenous background, but we're working on that and intentionally putting out job posting to help to rectify that. So what are community benefits agreements? They are the supplementary social and economic benefits arising from a development project that are intended to improve the well-being of a community affected by the project. This is how it's described in Bill 6, Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. So one of the things that we did very early is to make sure that the government of Ontario, through our advocacy work, we pushed to get actual language in legislation to support the work that we were doing. And so the Bill 6 Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act laid it out that community benefits would be required on these transit projects. It didn't have a specific target in the act. And so that's why it took us a little while to negotiate and press for the 10% that we got with Metrolinx. And importantly, these benefits are defined through an inclusive community engagement process. So for us, there are different types of community benefits agreements out there. We have adopted the community benefits approach that is a bottom-up. So we look at each project as they come, and we work towards getting a community benefits agreement with the client owner of that project. And in order to do that, we do deep community engagement each time, especially because we have focused since the last, our early days had been focused on these major multi-billion-dollar projects. Going forward in our next phase of strategic planning, we're looking at smaller projects, and we're looking at private developments as well. But the intensive community engagement work was necessary at the beginning because not many people knew about community benefits, and they would send us packing, literally. When we tried to ask for a community benefits agreement at the Casino Woodbine project, we were basically told that they had no obligations to talk with us. And so we said, yeah, what? Okay, we'll see about that, right? And so we had to get intense, we had to get, organized and do that community engagement process. Now we're seeing that there are more contractors for sure who are stepping forward, and different levels of government, they're implementing policy, and it's becoming a little bit more of the norm. So that deep community engagement that needed to happen for every project, now we're looking at setting up community benefits frameworks for whole areas. So instead of the one-off projects. And for us, community benefits are codified in a formally signed agreement. Community benefits, we know, we've seen it. It will not happen out of the goodness of anybody's heart, even at community level, because at the end of the day, community don't have the money and the resources, and sometimes the capacity to do the work, and it's intentional work. And so if community that is so passionate about it will give up at the, when the going gets tough, imagine the construction industry, who basically are wanting to build on budget and on time, and don't have that knowledge and expertise around recruiting from diverse communities, right? So we need to have an actual agreement that is signed, and those who are responsible to be held accountable. And so signed agreements and an openness to monitoring and evaluation for us, that signals a commitment to transparency and accountability. And that's essential for calling it a community benefits agreement. And for us, it was really important going forward to really define what community benefits agreements mean, because what we've seen over the years is that everybody loves community benefits. Everybody wants to do it. But when it comes to the intentional work that it takes to actually get it done, it's not as sexy anymore. And so in our conversations for starting up our next strategic planning process for the next 5 years from 2022 to 2027, we felt that we really needed to come up with our definition of what is a community benefits agreement. And also we wanted to use language that people already understood, so it could resonate. And so I'm sure anyone who's been in the, training or even or project management, about SMART objectives. So we basically co-opted that, and we said community benefits agreements need to be SMART. So they need to be specific, i.e. tied to a public infrastructure, urban development project, or a private development project. So we're not looking necessarily TCBN when we engage on community benefits. We're not looking at just general workforce development. We're specifically looking at the development world. We're looking at when we see a construction project happening that is, at a certain scale and scope, that's where we want to focus. It needs to be measurable. So for us, it needs to be legally binding and transparent with minimum hard targets, the T word that nobody likes, that are measurable through an agreed upon tracking, monitoring, and evaluation framework. Agreed upon is really important to us. It really speaks to the process that we've developed with Metrolinx and with our other projects where we have community benefits working groups where all the stakeholders come together, we meet on a quarterly basis, we follow up, we track, and we're able to address any issues and challenges that come up along the way. It needs to be achievable, bound to the developer, contractor, the subcontractors, and unions who are responsible for carrying out the work. And again, that's through lessons learned. So I'm giving you lessons learned right now. It's with the Eglinton Crosstown, we didn't meet that 10% commitment. And I'll say it very openly. And that's because there were some structural issues with the initial way that we developed it. But it was an agreement that was signed, and we had to move on with it. But the idea is that even though there was so these development projects, Crosslinks Transit Solutions, which is the consortium that was hired by Metrolinx to build the project, they don't do 100% of the work. They actually had an agreement. They do 20% of the hiring on the project. It's the subcontractors and the subcontractors and the subs of those that do 80% of the hiring on the project. And so the contract didn't have enough teeth that went long enough into those layers of subcontracting. And so where the general contractor, Crosslinks Transit Solutions, was able to hire directly, they surpassed the 10%. In fact, they're at 12%, maybe even more by now. And we'll see at the end when we do the final measurements. But because 80% of the hiring was done through the subcontractors and they didn't have a monitoring and tracking process with the subcontractors, their 1%, which replicates the current industry standards, right? You mix that with 12 and, iron it out, and it ends up looking like a 3.5% outcome at the end of the project, which is quite disappointing. And also the unions. So in Ontario, construction is highly unionized, especially with these major ICI, industrial, commercial, and institutional projects that we're particularly working with. And so if the unions don't have any accountability to the contract, and it's just the client owner and it stays there, and it doesn't drill down to the unions as well, then we're not going to see the success that we want. So it really has to be achievable. We have to think about all of those pieces going forward when we're thinking about developing a community benefits agreement. It needs to be relevant with a range of community benefits throughout the life cycle of the project. In the development world, there is, the planning and all these different stages, planning, design, then there is the build, and then there is the maintenance, the operations, right? So community benefits could be had throughout. It's not just, yes, we're focused on the phase in which the project is being built because you can get the most opportunities out of there. But in the planning, how do we look at intentionally setting up opportunities for people from historically disadvantaged communities to be able to participate in those planning process and to get jobs and to get contracts to participate in planning. And then it needs to be time bound. One thing is very clear: you cannot negotiate a community benefits agreement when the thing is happening right in front of you. You got to think about it well in advance and incorporate the different opportunities throughout the life cycle of the project. And so you have to start early. And that's that we've recognized how important that is, because everybody, in order for everyone to, to get comfortable with it, to understand the requirements, to develop that blueprint, you need to start the conversation early. So community benefits need to be smart. And the kinds of things that we tend to negotiate into a community benefits agreements are good jobs and career opportunities through local, diverse and equity hiring, like apprenticeships, professional, administrative and technical jobs and careers, long-term opportunities, operational jobs. For example, on the West Park Healthcare Center, they're very excited to be able to provide personal support worker opportunities. On the Casino Woodbine projects, there were table operating opportunities that were not necessarily construction work, right? So those are important. Social procurement, meaning purchasing from local businesses, minority-owned businesses, and social enterprises. Neighborhood improvements, for example, on the Casino Woodbine, we were able to get a childcare community center, a childcare center, sorry. For the Finch West LRT, we were able to get space designated for a community center, a recreational space. And the folks over in Hamilton, they are pushing for affordable housing. And we're looking at working with Creatio here in Toronto to have affordable housing as being part of their community benefits agreements. And environmental improvements like protection for our parks, as using sustainable building materials, etc. Those are all part of a community benefits agreement. But of course, the most important, regardless of what you're able to kind of pull out and tease out into an agreement finally, making sure that there's transparency and accountability for all parties. All of our community benefits projects, the client owner and the general contractor, they have a website. And they do upload. Sometimes they upload and do well in uploading regularly, but sometimes you got to prompt them and they'll remember to upload it. But the information is available online for the public to see. And yeah, so I've talked about these types of opportunities. So in the planning and design, in the project management and construction development, building management, operations and maintenance, these are the types of employment opportunities that we can find on a project. And then I've talked about and peppered a little bit some of the projects that we're working on. This just gives you a little overview. So the Metrolinx transit projects, the Casino Woodbine expansion, which is a community benefits agreement with the City of Toronto and TCBN participating on the oversight table and other groups as well. There's the West Park Healthcare Center, York University expansion projects, Creatio and Housing Now, and there is in Regent Park, a Toronto community housing building that's in its phase 4, phase 5 redevelopment that we are also supporting. And we're supporting all sorts of other active campaigns throughout Toronto, Downsview Lands redevelopment, Lawrence Heights Revitalization Coalition, Regent Park Neighborhood Association, Community Benefits Agreement for South Etobicoke, Golden Mile Impact Network, our Moss Park Coalition, and provincially, we're working across the province because we decided that we're going to keep the Toronto. So I talked about our next 5-year strategic plan. One of the conversations that we had and where we literally had no change, which was an intentional thing, is we decided to keep our Toronto in our name. So there is a lot happening in Toronto right now with the small capacity we have as an organization. We're 10 to 12 staff plus additional, on-call staff and part-time staff, but the core is about 12. And there are so many projects that we're involved in. We're mighty and we've been doing an amazing job, mainly because of the 121 member organizations and groups who are themselves also taking up other community benefits projects and keeping their eye out in their local neighborhoods. And so we've been able to do a lot, but there's just so much that's happening that we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. But what we are doing and willing to do any time is to share about what we're doing, and to even like any kind of documentation. We're very transparent. Like we literally took our bylaws and incorporation documents and handed them over to Hamilton so they could actually start their Hamilton Community Benefits Coalition, right? So that's just why recreate the wheel, right? They have so many more important things that they can do than to be thinking about, oh, what structure should we have? What should we say in the articles? And no, here they are. And, look at them and see if they make sense to you and accept the ones that you like. And so what we're doing is we're working across Ontario with 8 other municipalities and regions who are themselves developing their own community benefits coalitions. And so we meet on a regular basis with them. And Kumsa Bakker is the co-chair of that coalition of coalitions across Ontario. And yeah, we're monitoring different policies. The City of Toronto has the Community Benefits Framework. They have a social procurement program, the Provincial Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act that I talked about, that can help you to make the argument for community benefits when one comes to your neighborhood, the Federal Community Employment Benefits Initiative, and the Provincial Bill 23, and the planning changes around that is going to have a lot of impact. So we're actively monitoring, sending letters, making sure they know that we're paying attention. And we're doing a lot of capacity building within our community benefits ambassadors, who are going out there meeting with their locally elected representatives and talking to them about, community benefits and educating them on the issues and such. And boom, that's it from my slide presentation. Any questions specifically now that I can answer to kind of, help you in your, need for knowledge or for you developing your community benefits, programs.
That's great. Thanks so much, Rosemarie. Before we open it up to the wider audience, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to touch on just as part of our general questions. And I promise they're going to be short because I know we've got an engaged group here. In our community, the municipality will have to be pretty engaged in something of this nature. So just asking you, Rosemarie, how can the municipality engage in social procurement practices? Any thoughts on that? Any advice for a community of our size on how to go about that?
Well, what I would say is that the City of Toronto is also actively engaged. They have a community benefits framework. So it'd be really helpful, I think, if the municipality would work to create an internal community benefits framework for all the projects that they're undertaking, and to make that commitment to say we will implement a community benefits requirement on any project that we put out for tender. And with that, they can have social procurement requirements. Just like the City of Toronto, they have a social procurement policy that is linked to their community benefits framework as well. And they basically have set, I think it's $100,000 threshold or something like that. So we could share that with you. It's on the city's, website, but it's definitely doable. In Hamilton, and by the way, the City of Toronto has a team, a community benefits team. April Lim is one of the policy staff there, and she's very active in engaging with Toronto Community Benefits Network. We also they established a community benefits advisory group that meets regularly, and it has subcommittees as well. So to make sure that our partners from different from the contractor, from the union side, from the community side, are able to come and give feedback into the development of their implementation plan. So I think that's a really, really good best practice that you guys can develop. And what else would I say about that? With their Create TO Housing Now projects, the councillors, the city council have, passed motions to establish community benefits agreements on all of those Create TO Housing Now projects as well. So definitely an important role for the municipality to play. And even though the municipality is not a part of TCB, and we collaborate well together, in Hamilton, though, it's interesting to see that community benefits happen in different ways across the country. That is just our way of establishing the community benefits agreements with certain standards and best practices. But in Vancouver's done it a little bit differently. Hamilton, even right here, they actually have a representative from council that sits at their community benefits work, board table. So that's something interesting that you might consider.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for that insight. And I think it makes sense to collaborate and not reinvent the wheel, and go to these agreements and see what templates are in place, and kind of, I don't want to say make it easier, but have something to work from. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
So I see Cam Bedford, you've had your virtual hand up. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great, Rosemarie, that was really interesting. When I'm not in the county, I live a block from the Eglinton crosstown and have survived through construction for the last 10 years. A couple of quick questions. You just said 10%. Was that a 10% target, that 10% of the employment?
10% of the apprenticeships.
Of the apprenticeships. Okay. And I guess my two questions were, Danielle sort of asked the one question, which is how your group works with the municipality, and that I know here in most municipalities, there's an objective of some community benefits, whether that's parkland within a development or childcare or social housing within a building. So if those are already happening as some aspect of community benefits, and then you're working with stakeholders on other aspects, how does that all meld together so you're not tripping over each other or collectively demanding more than a project can bear, or you know what I mean?
Constant communication and transparency. So with Metrolinx, it's a provincial body, right? So we were able to get that 10% commitment from Metrolinx. And I didn't tell you the story about Metrolinx yet, but it's a positive one despite the setback. But with that 10%, yeah, we would like to see more. And so we, 10% was 10 years ago. So we need to advance. But with the city, we also, as a coalition, we pushed to also get the city to have their own policy. And so a community benefits framework was established by the city for projects that they build. And with that, there is a 10% mandatory requirement for the city, because we had already negotiated with Metrolinx for the 10%. We set that as basically the standard. And so we pushed the city to have 10%, and they accepted and agreed to that. And this is what they're currently in the process of figuring out how to implement. The Create TO project, Create TO is separate from the city. It's a separate body of the city. And they also have a 10% requirement because City Council had authorized that through a motion that was passed by all council. It's, the information, we are as transparent as possible. These are documented on the city's website. You will see all the details about the community benefits framework. You'll see the details about the community benefits agreement on the Casino Woodbine project. You'll see the information about Create TO and their requirements as well, so you can, compare across silos. And then also, like I said, the City of Toronto, they have an implementation committee or an advisory committee and subcommittees. So lots of conversations is how I would say we're able to kind of maintain that, consistency across the board.
And then I guess real quickly is, what role do you play then in the facilitating the implementation of the agreement? For, like in your case, apprenticeships, are you guys actually helping coordinate apprenticeships?
So that's yes. So that's the one thing that we were very conscious of as an organization. We will push for the agreements, but as community and labor coming together, we also wanted to roll up our sleeves and make sure that we're supporting the implementation. So we are funded. So now we have $2.5 million funding from different levels of government and from the foundation. And with that, we've basically established programming We do deep outreach into our community. So you'll see a lot of social media activity. We have about 16,000 supporters right now in our database. So, just, pushing the message out. We have, and we have what we call community benefits ambassadors. So these are, part-time or on-call staff who are basically people who have gone through our different programmings and who understand the process of, accessing the apprenticeship, opportunities. And they themselves, we basically deploy them out into neighborhoods. And, every summer, for example, you'll see us out at, we're in Scarborough, we're in Jane and Finch, we're in Rexdale, we're in, just on the street, handing out flyers. We go to the churches, the mosque, wherever. So the outreach is really important because this is an industry that has significantly ignored a large swath of our population. And these people don't even see themselves anymore as they're not even turning their eyes towards construction as an opportunity. So we have to get their attention and get them to sign up. And then we have apprenticeship readiness training. So we have a 140-hour training program that once we're able to outreach to them, get their attention, do information sessions. We do our ready to build tours. We take them to union training centers for them to see what construction is like. We take them to the job sites of the Crosslinks or Mosaic, the Finch West LRT, show them, different types of construction and encourage them to get in. Once they're in, we do a 140-hour apprenticeship readiness training with them, which talks about the industry, prepares them with all the basic certifications. And once they're finished with that, we work with our different unions to basically get them intaked into the different unions. We have 12 of the largest unions who are members of our network. So the Carpenters Union, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Union Workers, the UA Local 46, the plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters, pipe fitters, iron workers. They're all members of the TCBN. And so when it's time for their intake, we have a pool of people who are prepared that we can then help to support, to assess, and to refer into these unions. And it's the unions who then put people onto the different job sites. Right. But we also collaborate directly with the general contractor to let them know that we have these pool of ready candidates. Most recently, I'm not sure if you'll see it, but if you go to, and I'll put in the chat, employerportal.ca is where we created this tool. It's a job posting site. People can upload their resume, and it's a portal that is focused on diversity hiring. And so the employers put up their jobs, and we help to vet people and refer them into those opportunities. So yeah, there's a lot of work on the other side in terms of supporting the implementation that we also do ourselves in collaboration with the 120 member organizations and groups, especially the pre-apprenticeship training providers, as well as the employment service providers. And we provide wraparound supports too. So we have financial supports, hard hat boots, certificates that they need, cover childcare costs, et cetera, to make sure that, there's a supportive system around them to help connect them into the industry. Also have a mentoring program. So the Next Gen Builders mentoring program is where, recognizing that there's not a lot of them reflected in these workspaces, but there's a lot of good people with good hearts who want to see Black people succeed, who want to see, newcomers succeed and women succeed. And so we have mentors who we place, everyone receives a training, both the mentee and the mentor. And then we match them in a formal mentoring relationship for 1 year. They're required to meet on a monthly basis. And during those meetings, we have guidance for how they have supportive conversations and how they can basically help them to navigate issues and challenges that come along the way. So long answer to your
thank you.
Very excellent question.
That provides a lot more color there. Thank you.
Oh, that's great to hear. We have a question from Renia Tominski next, and then Kathy Kennedy has one in the chat box after Renia. So Renia, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Rosemary. That was a really inspiring presentation, and very impressed by all that you built in a very short period of time. I have to fess up. I was the person who bumped into Maureen at Metro yesterday, which was very fortuitous because it gave me the opportunity to talk to her about the co-housing initiative that I'm discussing with Chris Stevens of Co-Housing Options Canada. And I have a historic property here in Prince Edward County with a couple of acres of land. And I bought it as a cross-cultural education center. So currently I have a couple of collaborations going on with the Francophone African community in Toronto, and also with an organization that supports Afghan newcomers and refugees. And that historically has always been a group. Newcomers have historically always been a group that we've depended on in the trades in Canada. And they're being very hard hit now with the food and housing security issues that are going on. So what I'm doing with Chris Stevens in building my proposal is building into it a component for ESL training, which is essential for them to be making it into the workforce as you're describing it. And I'm wondering if that's something that your organization supports or has any initiatives around, or how that factors in for you.
So our organization doesn't have ESL training, but like you said, it's an essential component of what's needed in order to access employment opportunities in general, but also the construction industry. They require, regardless of whether you have a doctorate, if you're a great surgeon, they need you to show them that you've completed your grade 10 English, maths, and English. And or your grade 12 maths and English and mechanical aptitude, depending on which trade you're getting into. So language proficiency, being able to read blueprints, being able to, for safety, it's important, and so, yeah, we do find that there is, often there is enough times where we're seeing that people aren't able to participate, to basically get their basic certificates. They're being refused entry into the union because they don't have this. What we do is we do referrals. So we have organizations who form a part of our network who offer these services. And so we will refer candidates to these organizations to help get their basic upgrading. And we can also pay for those costs as well, if there are, like maybe some administrative costs. Most of these services are free, but sometimes there's some, small cost to it. We can cover those things as well. But yes, just to reaffirm how important that is, especially for newcomers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great question, Rania. So Kathy Kennedy has a question in the chat box, and Rosemary, she's asking if you can describe the process that you undertook during consultations with communities that would be affected.
Let's go to the most exciting one was the Casino Woodbine. So the Casino Woodbine project, 10 years before we actually engaged with them, the community had already been demanding community benefits agreements. So as you can see, our Toronto Community Benefits Network built on an existing, platform and strategy for community benefits agreements. So it's not new. And that was very important to us, that, Canada is very averse to any kind of risk. So we wanted to really demonstrate a concept that was tried and proven. And so the community had already been demanding this when the Casino Woodbine expansion project was, initially being discussed. They wanted to incorporate table gaming instead of just racing at the casino. And people in Rexdale were pretty upset by it because it's a community that is highly it's multicultural, but there was a strong Muslim population there as well. And for them, gambling was just the worst. And, they were really, really worried that their children and their women, were going to be negatively impacted, by gambling and all that comes with it. And so they were pushing against it. The government at the time wanted to implement this, casinos either downtown at the Lakeshore or in Rexdale. And the downtown casino didn't happen because people were able to push back against that. They were more, affluent. But the Rexdale one was decided that, yes, they would have gambling there. So the community pushback, they even had community, like town halls with, 750 people attending. Like I look back at the news of the time and you'll see all of that. But because of the recession that happened, it basically took a backseat. The company pulled out and, but when TCBN started and it was basically reintroduced that they've basically given the contract to One Toronto Gaming, the community started to reactivate. And unfortunately, at the time, the community organizing group, CORD, and the Unite Here, the union, the local union that had been pushing against it, they didn't have any more strength or bandwidth to kind of go forward with that. And so they reached out to TCBN and said, listen, we need you to kind of step in to support us because we can't do this anymore. Our group has disbanded. Could you please help us out? And so we basically took that information back to our board. I did, and I took the information back to our membership and we voted. And it was agreed that we needed to basically step in to support CORD to do the community organizing and to get that community benefits agreement going. We assigned some funds. We had some funding from the Atkinson Foundation at the time. And so we assigned some funds to help support the organizing work that would need to happen. And then we basically hired 2 full-time people on a 3-month contract to help us. And that's basically how we got Kumsa as our campaigns organizer at the time. And Kumsa and Joe and us and some board members, and we created a Rexdale Rising. If you go to, I think it's rexdalerising.ca, you will see information about the coalition that we created around that. And basically, we met, we planned, we did the issue education. We basically had Acorn as a partner organization who went and knocked on doors and spoke to many, many residents about what's at stake. And we basically had community consultation sessions. We then reached out to One Toronto Gaming, who then told us to take a hike because they had no interest in talking with us and they had no requirement to talk with us. Luckily, the previous organizers 10 years ago had actually created or got passed a motion at City Hall to have what they call 21 conditions. And those 21 conditions was recorded at City Council and recorded on City's website, so transparency. And with those 21 requirements, we were able to reach out to One Toronto Gaming. They told us that they wouldn't talk with us, so we basically decided to go to the city. And that's when we said, hey, city, you have this 21 conditions that needs to be fulfilled. You need to make sure that there's a community benefits agreement. We're going to hold you accountable to it. The city then intervened and went to One Toronto Gaming and tried to organize, to have some sessions, and they took over the responsibility. That being said, the city had its own process of community consultation. So we didn't give up at that time and just allowed the city to kind of take it wherever they wanted it to go, because we had specific outcomes and requirements that we wanted. We had actually developed those 21 conditions plus additional new demands that the community had after we had done those consultations. With that, we attended every single one of the city's consultation sessions, and we brought community residents there. And when they had opportunities to kind of give feedback and staff were taking notes, we made sure that we had residents there from the local community who could speak up. And so basically that was what it was. And, you know, we followed through, we went to City Hall, we made deputations, and City Council passed the community benefits agreement requirement. So it was long and intensive. Lots of, you know, challenges along the way, lots of champions also along the way within City Council and, you know, within the community organizations and labor groups that we had. And so that's how we were able to get our community benefits agreement with the Casino Woodbine Pass. And with it, there was a requirement to have an oversight table and 3 different subcommittees to address concerns around workforce development, as well as the gambling concerns that the community had. And yeah, that's, and it's still continuing. It's going to continue for the 19 years of the contract that the One Toronto Gaming has for the Casino Woodbine.
That's fantastic.
Oh, and we got 20% local hiring, 20% social hiring. We got a childcare center, $5 million set aside. We got community space. Yeah, we were pretty excited when that came through. Sorry, Dominic.
No, as you should be. I'd be pretty pumped about that too. Kathy, does that answer your question? Great. Yeah, very great outcomes for the casino for sure. Any other questions from the group? Feel free to raise. Oh, I see Maureen Adams has a question. Please go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah. Rosemary, it's a fantastic presentation, and it builds on the 2 that we've had before it. But each time we've said to ourselves, you have to start somewhere. So when you started in the beginning, and what do you need to start? Like in your organization, you have 12 full-time staff. I mean, that's small but very mighty. But what did you need in the beginning? I know the foundations gave you some money, but what did you need to start? Because we're small organizations mostly here in Prince Edward County, and we're small. The Prince Edward Learning Center is also considers itself small, but mighty, you know, sort of punching above its weight in terms of the number of staff we have. But we can't take initiative on after initiative without some seed money of some sort. So tell us a bit about what you had in the beginning that enabled the whole thing to start.
Well, I mean, I had $250,000, which included my salary. And you know, that was thanks to the foundations. When I came on board, there was an additional commitment by the Ontario Trillium Foundation for a specific outreach and employment program. So that was an additional $250 that came in very early when I started as well. So with $500,000, the first thing that, well, I mean, before anything, you literally need a good board of directors or a good, what you might call it, you know,
a planning
committee.
Yeah.
You need that with people who actually care, and hopefully a representative group, but also people who have direct, you know, connections and who are willing to open up their Rolodesk, you know, and help to kind of create space for you. The Toronto and New York Region Labor Council played a really big championship role early when I started. John Cartwright was the president or the co-chair of the board at the time. And for me as a person, you know, I don't have any construction background. I knew nothing about construction. You know, and they hired me as the executive director because of my community, you know, connectedness and my understanding around employment services. But he needed to connect me into the construction space, and he gave a lot of, he created a lot of opportunities, you know, called people, you know, arranged meetings, provided me with mentors, et cetera, et cetera. So even without money,
Mhm.
Have a good steering group that's willing to, be like a laser focused on the opportunities that are coming in front of you and making, good decisions as to which ones you ought to pursue or not to pursue. Have some kind of a process for decision making for what type of project has the most opportunity. We wanted to have something that is, the lowest hanging fruits where you could start and have a win. So if you have something you can focus on, it helps. And so then after that, what they did was to make sure that they hired an executive director and gave her, I would say, the authority to be able to operate in their name, right? But still lots of good supervision and follow-up and mentorship and support throughout. And you need some dollars. So it just doesn't happen on its own. And even when I was there, we had 1.5 staff that we were able to also hire with these funds as well. We had a location because we rented space outside of one of our partner organizations. So because of our membership structure, other organizations were able to step up and support in different ways, and they were able to assign staffing. In fact, the 1.5 staff that we had was actually a secondment initially to the TCBN, right? So an organization basically assigned their own staff to work on behalf of the TCBN to help build capacity and to get us going. I mean, those are some good, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was great. Mhm.
Thank you. Okay. Cam, your virtual hand went up first, and then Jamie, you are next.
I'll just be super quick. Rosemarie, obviously something as massive as the crosstown, a project we'd never encounter here, but I can imagine with any case, there's going to be a lot of different community organizations or people in the community with different priorities. And so collecting, gathering, but more, and I can appreciate there's all kinds of consultation and your member groups did consultation, maybe more, how do you whittle down those things that become the actual priorities?
Strategic plan.
Like you could negotiate on rather than we've got 1,000 people with 1,000 different needs and you clearly can't negotiate that way.
Yes, no, that is so true. And I guess being open and transparent and just, letting people know realistically, this is what we can do, like, no, you won't get that. Do you want to move forward or not? And you know what? We did lose some people along the way. As we basically narrowed down our decisions and focused on where we wanted to go. For us, we didn't want to recreate the wheels. There were already partners who were already doing work. So what is it that TCBN can do and do well? Where is it that we needed to intervene, right? If Labor Education Center was already doing apprenticeships, we didn't want to do apprenticeships, not initially anyways. So we knew we didn't want to do that. TCBN, we wanted to stay at where we had only a staff and a half, an executive director plus a staff and a half. We wanted to focus on just negotiating the opportunities. We didn't get into implementation support until the Ontario Trillium Foundation dollars kind of came in. And as you can, our first strategic plan was in 2016. The first thing that I literally did when I came was to do a strategic plan. Alejandra Bravo, she was the external consultant from the Broadbent Institute that we brought in. And she was already one of the founding kind of members of the organization. So we asked her to kind of take us through that process. And we literally consulted with 101. We talked about 101 damnation, so that's why I remember the number. So we consulted with 101 people in person. We had so many meetings, and we had surveys, and we had focus groups, and we basically identified the things that we had the most consensus for, and we said, this is how we're moving forward. And only when we found that we were able to build enough capacity did we take on additional projects and initiatives as we went along. So yeah, some people were really upset. For example, in a community benefits agreement, you usually have the jobs. So professional, administrative, and technical jobs. you have apprenticeships, and you have social procurement, neighborhood and environmental improvement, monitoring, tracking, and evaluation. So a strong community benefits agreement will give you all 5. But we didn't get a target for the professional, administrative, and technical. We focused on the apprenticeship, and we were able to get the 10% because we had the unions on board who said, okay, fine, we could do 10%. And at the time, Metrolinx didn't want to have a conversation about the other areas. We also weren't able to demonstrate to them that other projects had any targets on the professional, administrative, and technical, but we were able to demonstrate that apprenticeships have always had. In the UK and the United States, there's a target there. So we were able to look at precedents. For the social procurement, we didn't get a target. It was very much an aspirational goal. The neighborhood and environmental improvement didn't even make it into the actual community benefits agreement with Metrolinx. For the Eglinton Crosstown, it was basically just a, so at the time, the environmental groups who were a part of the TCBN wanted us to push, and we were pushing to make sure that Metrolinx did not put that gas-powered plant that they wanted for as backup for the power system for the Eglinton line. And we did end up getting Metrolinx to back off and to basically install Tesla battery-powered plant. That you will never find that in the actual agreement. We got, for the Eglinton Crosstown, there was a old dilapidated building that the community wanted to be kept. It has significant importance to them. It wasn't really historic, but there was a big push, like the campaign was very active around that. But what the community was able to do in discussion with Metrolinx is to get that Kodak building recognized as a historic site. And so with that, Metrolinx spent over $1 million to basically put rails under that building and basically moved it out of the way. They then built their subway, their underground station, and they then pulled it, rolled it back on top of. And so that building is now one of the iconic structures on the Eglinton Crosstown. You will never see that in the actual agreement. Right? So yes, you win some, you lose some. Acorn was a really strong member and is a strong member of TCBN. They focus on housing. They were very upset with us that we couldn't get housing as part of the deal. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Rosemary. Jamie Coatsworth, you had a question if you'd like to unmute yourself.
I've done that, and I apologize for my dark image on the screen. Is how this backlight thing is how mafia hitmen are usually interviewed on TV. My question is about the M part of SMART, which is the measurement of results. You obviously would like to be able to measure the improvements in the community in various ways. For sure, easier said than done. And the government that's funding this undertaking would like to know what costs, if any, were incurred in terms of additional project costs. And this sort of gets into the whole issue that I've had some experience with before, called social return on investment, which is where governments that are funding social programs would like to be able to see some measurement of the outcomes that funding has achieved, so that they could compare it to other ways in which the money could be spent, so that the outcome that they want to achieve, is better spent on that particular initiative than something else, maybe or maybe not. So, can you tell me what how you've been able to measure the success of this initiative, and what has been come back from the other side in terms of the cost of it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a really good and complex question. Let's start with, we don't have a social return on investment report yet on any of the projects that we've started. The Metrolinx Eglinton Crosstown is the most mature, and it's coming to an end very soon. They're at 98 point something % of completion, which may take another 10 years, or it may take a year, I don't know. But there is a commitment by Metrolinx to actually develop such a report. Because it would have a more broader kind of interpretation of what success means, right? Currently, the way that we have been measuring is by looking at just the hard data. So in terms of how many people hired, which union they were hired from, you know, have they been retained on the job, just very specifically. Also, how much, what's the amount of spend on social procurement, what's the spend on social enterprises. So we have all of those numbers. So there is reporting that happens on a quarterly basis, and we share the report on the website. And there's an annual report that is also developed that gives more of an overview of what happened the previous year. So those are all there, and it does talk about you know, the different activities, engagement that the general contractor has, you know, done throughout the year with communities. So you'll be able to see the actual numbers. Now, TCBN also, we undertook what we called a stakeholder evaluation of community benefits for about 2 or 3 years in a row. We haven't done it this year again, but basically it's looking at from the TCBN perspective, how as community we've been able to you know, how the communities within our own little TCBN community has been able to integrate into those jobs and opportunities and the social outcomes and such that has been able to be achieved as a result. We even attempted a very small social return on investment exercise, and so we also have that, which we can share. But it's not comprehensive enough. We haven't had the level of partnership and commitment and financial resources that is necessary as yet to undertake a comprehensive you know, measurement and evaluation and reporting. But we do intend to do so, especially with the Eglinton Crosstown, because we want to really see it as a model. The other thing that we've looked at, just in terms of the costs for the project, with the way that we approach community benefits, we never asked for even $1 from the project. We basically said, with the existing funds that you received from the government to do this work, we want you to do things differently. We want to make sure that you're having some targets that are going to you know, demonstrate outcome, and that you're going to work with the community in an intentional way in order to make this this happen. So in terms of the cost, like the real cost that we know would be in addition to what they would have to do normally anyways. Any organization, they have to hire people, so they have to do human resources, they have to do communications. They're just basically making sure that they're extending that to the community and not just their regular sources. And so for the Eglinton Crosstown, they've had to assign a community benefits liaison. So we know that that's someone that is directly connected to the project, and they had to pay that person a full-time salary. That being said, none of the projects that we've worked on actually assigned a full-time person just to the community benefits work. It's been a mix of communications, their general communications, you know, to the you know, related to the project that they would normally do anyways. And that person has the additional responsibility to take on the community benefits work. So I would say maximum 50% of that staff salary would be related to community benefits. Also, because there's a requirement that they attend every 3 months, the community benefits working group table, they probably have maybe 4 staff attending these sessions, and they're like 3 hours maximum every quarter. Of course, they have to prepare for it like you would have to do for any meeting. So there's some cost there. I get it. And of course, they have to put out these reports, so somebody has to prepare the reports. So I'm just from a community side saying I would basically push back and ask the general contractor themselves to actually tell us what they estimate to be the additional costs that they had to incur in order to implement the community benefits agreement. From a community perspective, looking on in terms of what we've literally seen from them, it's not much. And not only that, the value that we brought as community to supporting them with the outreach and the recruitment, to supporting them with their brand recognition, to support them, you know, I think it would be good for us to exchange numbers.
Thank you. I think if the contractors involved did not think it was going to increase the cost of doing the project, you wouldn't have any negotiations about or any difficult negotiations about implementing the community involvement that you're looking for. And at the end of the day, it's something like that is funded by the government, so it'll be the government as opposed to, by the time the dust settles on this project that has been hugely over budget, there will be some assessment of where the additional costs came from, and I'm sure this issue will crop up then, and hopefully it's not a big deal. But until they know how big a deal it is, it's going to be a question. And if the government determines that they spend an extra X dollars and the measurable outcome is only Y dollars, that they're, as I said earlier, they'll compare that and think, could we have, if we took a different approach to trying to make the similar community improvements, could we have done at a lower cost? So, but that's what social return on
that's what it will do for us. Exactly.
That's what it's all about. So
exactly.
I think it's certainly worth your while, and I'm sure there's probably some government money available to you to help measure as best you can what the positive outcomes are of the initiative that you've taken.
Jamie, I agree with you 100%. I'm really eager. We are very eager to start looking at. So they're now going to, come the end of the project, open up a little bit your books so we can kind of understand, what has been the real costs per se to implementing this project. Because you know what? The Bill 6 Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act, that was the actual policy. The government needed to develop regulations to support the implementation of the community benefits agreement, which would have included an assessment of the cost. And they did implement what they called, the new government when they came in, said that they would basically do this on 5 pilots. And Finch West LRT was one of those pilots. The West Park Healthcare Center was one of those pilots. And there's a courthouse in Halton maybe, and the McDonald Block reconstruction that was also supposed to be. So there were 5 pilots that were to be implemented and reviewed and evaluated, and that simply has not happened. So the regulations need to come, and I think that this kind of information will feed into it, is going to be important to feed into the regulations.
Good, thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, we are reaching the end of our webinar time, and I want to thank everybody for their very insightful questions. And Rosemary, thank you for fielding those questions so thoughtfully and with really great answers. So to wrap up, I'm going to pass this over to Maureen Adams, the chair of the Prince Edward Learning Center board, just for final comments. Maureen, over to you. And you're just on mute, so we can't hear your lovely voice.
Thank you, Dominique. My job at the end is to thank people, which is a very nice job to have. So I really wanted to start with you, Rosemary. And I guess on a personal note, you are an absolutely fabulous presenter. So I want to start there, because this community benefits agreement, maybe for people around this table, it's the first time they ever heard about it. It's complex, and you have presented in a way that I think most of us can go away from this meeting understanding what it is and how it works. So I wanted to thank you personally. Lots of people present data, and you had more questions and you didn't really understand it by the end of the meeting, but you did a really great job. And I also want to thank you for the frankness of your conversation, that you talked about the challenges that you faced and how you held to your values on community development and diversity while going through many priorities, many different communities, and having to make tough decisions so that you could be successful. And like you have said, and I think some of us have experienced, sometimes if you can't get consensus and you add in things to a project, you actually don't get the project. So I appreciate your discussion about that. Everybody wants affordable housing or whatever each community wants. And sometimes you don't get it in the first go around and you get it in the next project. So thank you for that. We don't often hear about those challenges as in an as honest a way that you have done them. And I think we would all say this has been a remarkably successful initiative. These are big projects in a big complex place like the city of Toronto, and a variety of them with different interest groups and so on. So really, I think we would all congratulate you on just remarkable work that you've done. And it's a pleasure to meet you, even on Zoom. And I wanted to thank our very able facilitator, Dominique, and the County Foundation for many things, but having her take a lead on these 3 sessions. And she too, like you, is a fabulous facilitator. So thank you, Dominique. And of course, Katie, where are you? There you are, Katie, from Thrive. Because in partnership with the foundation, like this is a beginning partnership between the foundation and Thrive and our organization, and you have the same passion that everyone on that initiative has. So thank you for your support. And as I've done before, I want to thank the PEC staff. The numbers are growing in terms of who was on this call today. So I hope there's been learning for them and also for our board. On today's call, we have 5 of our board members. We have a small board of 10, so we have half of our board members here on this Zoom call. Whoops, I'm gone. Uh-oh.
We can still see you, Maureen.
Oh,
And see
can
you.
you?
Yeah.
What do I do to be seen? It doesn't matter. And then I want to thank everybody else who has been on the calls. I know that some people have been able to attend all 3 of them, starting with the Community Land Trust, then the Social Purpose Construction business, and now this one today. And as we said before, we want to make sure you are on our contact list so you can get updates and hear about future plans. And finally, I think we would all agree, those of us who've been in all the sessions or one of them or 2 of them, that it's been an incredible learning series. Lots of new information, ideas, passion all over, and innovative thinking. And hopefully it will create a spark for us in the county to move the work forward. And the key learnings that we have had from all 3 initiatives, I think have really inspired us to look at how we might move forward. So that's all I would want to say. Thank you. And I'm sorry I can't see you all. I pressed obviously the wrong button and you're all gone.
All good,
Thank you.
Maureen. I'm sure that you will be bumping into more engaged community members at grocery stores to continue this conversation live. Thank you again, Rosemary. It really was a pleasure. And thank you everybody for attending today. Please stay tuned to the Prince Edward Learning Center, Thrive PEC, and the County Foundation. More to come, I'm sure, and really appreciate you engaging in this Lean In and Learn session. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your morning, and hopefully you all get some sunshine and vitamin D.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.